Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson, and joining me today are Jake Niall, mid-sip of coffee, and Carolyn Wilson. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for the coffee, Michael.
Oh, that's
about
right.
time you shouted.
Oh, it was a little birthday gift to you all.
There's a happy birthday.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit going on, isn't there?
There is a lot going on. Where do we start? I mean, the Cats are the Zip 3. That is, and the manner of their loss, I think, to the Gold Coast, the team that you were highly critical of just a week ago.
They're still not out of the woods, the Gold Coast,
but that was a good win.
It was a great win. It was a great win, and they needed that win way more than Chris Scott, who is, after all, the premiership coach.
Yeah.
But Jake, before we move on to the Gold Coast, is Tom Hawkins? Should he be playing? It's looking it looked a bit embarrassing at times.
Well, he's not done.
Weekend.
He's behind, and it's an interesting thing that we always think the better players can carry shorter preparations, but time and again we find that's not the case in modern
Older
footy.
players can't, and bigger, heavier players can't.
Well,
normally.
I think the only thing you'd say in favour of that decision is that Jeremy Cameron has benefited from having Hawkins actually playing. Now, could you have had someone else that would draw another player?
Well, Geelong certainly benefited from having
Geelong
Jeremy
are 03,
Cameron playing, because where would they be without him?
As a coach that Carol and I dealt with, and Gleeson, you a fair bit as well, a fair bit. Dennis Pagan used to say, success demands no explanation. So if you win with that setup, with Hawkins not being right or being fit, you get away with it, but they're 03. So we all ask the question.
Well,
it's
you
a
know,
good idea.
I think
I don't know what his GPS, I mean, I'll get all technical. I don't know how much what his physical data is, but he doesn't look the same player.
Jack Henry's hurting them, but Mitch Duncan's hurting them too. Just that ball use, that they look slow. Like, not just
whenever they lose, they look
foot
slow,
speed.
Joel.
They do, but it's the ball movement that becomes slow. And I thought it was a real counterpoint with Gold Coast, who were aggressive in their ball movement. They really looked for the corridor wherever they could, went fast with it, and you know they were. I actually think it was an 8-goal loss dressed up as something less. The Ben King should have been, you know, he could have had half a dozen marks to half time and kicked them away. I thought that
the Cosius has kicked one from
from
how far out?
They measured that at 73 metres.
He went back. He went back like, I'm going to kick this. And come on.
What are you, Malcolm Blight?
Yeah.
You know? And he kicked a drop punt.
Kicked a drop punt from inside the square.
They put on a show, didn't they? It was they were great to watch, and I did completely put the moz on myself when I put the heat.
When you did it, I thought,
they're going to win now.
Because I've written these. I remember writing one. One of my best ones was writing about saying Jeff White they should trade, and then he won the best and fairest. I can remember that at Melbourne. I got reminded of that by Neil Danaher a couple of times. I said, "Oh, gee."
Bit harsh.
Got that one wrong, Jake.
Got that one.
Well, Jake, I'm 2 from 2 because we had Sam Mitchell on Footy Classified on Monday night and completely put the heat on him, and he's no longer so. But I still maintain that Dew is the one most under pressure, and you just feel that so many people wanted to coach the Gold Coast last year, and you know, people still say that there's a lingering sort of. Big names like someone like Chris Scott, who at some point will leave Geelong, although heaven knows when. You know, that's the sort of job he would be ideal to do. So, and he doesn't sell the club as well as the AFL would like, partly because they just don't win, and he hasn't had enough experience at it. But I maintain they were terrible in round one, disappointing, and they really should have won last week.
They were. They came in, a couple of blokes playing basically the first games, a couple of players that were underdone. Chol was dreadful. Casbolt was really poor, but was good on Sunday against the Cats. I think that they had players that were getting, like they were underdone, and now they're getting to that point. You're right in everything you say about him as the pressure and what underperforming and what underwhelming for them, but they've now got to win. If we'll measure them again in another, you know, they're going to be the watch team for the year.
If your point is,
let's talk around the bye.
Exactly. If your point is guilty till proven innocent, the Gold Coast Suns, I'm with you 100%, because you can't trust them. They haven't earned our trust as a club and as a.
I tell you who else we can't trust. Their neighbours up the road. I mean, you know, when is
they've been in the finals a lot though. They've been prelims, and it's whether they can make that next step.
It's the win away thing too. I mean, it's the different.
They win at the Gabba, and we know at the Gabba, we know on Thursday night they're going to play well. Whether win or lose, where they'll go in favourites probably, slight favourites.
We'll get to that game, but well, with Collingwood, but you're right. I still can't. I don't think we should move off the. You talk about can't trust them. We could trust the Cats, and now look at where they're going. And they play Hawthorn. They lost this game last year on Easter Monday, and Hawthorn comes in with that.
Can I offer 2 words of something that's wrong with Geelong? Joel Selwood. I
thought you were going to say too old.
No. Joel Selwood is a generational player and leader. He'll be remembered. He'll probably be a legend of in the Hall of Fame. He'll probably be that. There's not many of them. He's leadership. Even in key games last year, we looked half gone. There were still games, including that final that they had to win, that the pivotal game being the qualifying final against Collingwood. The 2 games against Collingwood were pivotal, where he has willed himself and got clearances at critical moments. And I think there's been a shuffle back in their midfield. I think what's happened is he's not there. There's more on Dangerfield. Atkins has gone backwards. He had a career year last year. This year, Duncan's not playing. Guthrie's not going quite as well. It's like a critical mass, and you see how one player can shift it. Conversely, at Collingwood, we'll get to them later, but Tom Mitchell coming in, which I didn't necessarily think was a great idea, that has created a critical mass of good players.
I also thought that yesterday on Sunday magnified it by Matt Rowell, who was outstanding, and a player who's never been taught that that it's okay to get an uncontested possession, that you don't have to have 6 players on you every time you get the ball. But he's often been likened to Selwood, and he was fantastic, or as Carey would say, he was mighty. He was mighty.
He was mighty, and it's good to see him being mighty again. On the other side, the same side of the ground, I should say, Tom Stewart. There was just a couple of momentarily uncharacteristic mistakes that he'll be hard on himself for. And is that just a player who's underdone?
Yeah.
Is that a player who doesn't have Joel Selwood there? I mean, as to Jake's point, does pressure, scrutiny, which it seems to have, come upon the new captain? I mean, everyone shouted me down last week on Channel 9 when I thought it was a bit rough of Nathan Buckley to say he wasn't a heart and soul player, Patrick Dangerfield. Matthew Lloyd said, but I know what he meant. He's not... I mean, Joel Selwood is generational. Patrick Dangerfield, in another way, is heart and soul, isn't he? Or is he just a brilliant player?
Well, he's also a smart bloke.
Yep.
And very thoughtful character. Maybe Selwood's got a force of personality. I mean, a lot of these things are just... So it's like Ross Lyon. Totally different sort of person, but... Ross Lyon has an effect on a group, whatever it is, and it seems like it's very positive at St Kilda at the moment. People who have this sort of galvanising effect on others, there are not very many of them. It's. I'm not sure heart and soul is the right way to put it. I think it's more what Joel Selwood is rather than what Patrick Dangerfield isn't.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
That's probably fair. And it wasn't like he just ran the team. Sounds like he sort of ran the club.
Well, it could be a bit of an. I mean, I think there were people who thought he might be too much of an enforcer, weren't there, Gleeson? There was a.
Yeah, look, he was...
When he first came into the captaincy,
he was very hard. Very hard. But, look, maybe it loads up on Joel because he's the obvious missing piece, but there are so many missing pieces to their
And he was definitely gone. He retired at the right time.
Yeah, he did.
So I just wonder, did they just, a bit like Richmond in 2020, just pull on every last... bit of strength and resolve to finally get that flag that was coming to them.
I think so.
And now they've got it.
Them more to
Carlton 1995.
Yeah, and now they've got it,
Very
the inevitable cliff. They've reached the cliff.
And the big exhale. The whole club goes, wow, we got there.
It reminds me a hell of a lot of Carlton 95, where you had Kernahan, Bradley, Williams, all those plus 30 players who were absolute Silvani was a little bit younger, but
had to get another
Peter
flag.
Dean, just champion players. These guys are just great players who've been so close. They'd won the flag in 87, like the Geelong one earlier, and they had to get it out. And I think there was a lot of that. And there might be an exhale. This might just be an exhale moment where they've sort of...
And then you look at their fixture in their home games and you think, well, they'll probably still make the 8.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. They'll
9
get
games
on a
to
roll
come at Kardinia Park.
They'll get on a roll. The other one that
Sorry,
was
GMH.
the other one that was very notable on the Sunday was the Melbourne finally getting a win over the Swans at the MCG. I think it was 9 out of the last 10 between those two teams at the MCG.
A few went missing for Sydney, didn't they, Jake?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, Isaac Heaney had a poor game.
Well, you could say it was a grand final replay for him.
Yeah, well, he had a few mates on grand
yeah.
final day, but yeah, Sydney was a big I thought Melbourne would win, but I didn't think Sydney would play like that.
I tipped Sydney on the back of the way they'd started the season. They seem to be, you know how you get teams that are either going to be crushed by a grand final like that or emboldened by it to know right or wrong. It felt like they were the team righting a wrong until Sunday.
Were they buddy centric?
Oh, they've long been buddy centric. They look better to me when in the last bit when he's not there.
10 times they kicked to him, I think. I think the next highest was 3 or 4.
I mean, look at Logan McDonald's output in the first few weeks.
If they want to play him, if they want to play Buddy Franklin, then they have to kick to him less and treat him a bit like Hawthorn did in that last year when he was at Hawthorn, where he was a half-forward flanker. Make him take a good player away. If they make him a focal player, this goes for Jack Rewalt too, getting stuck into the old players a bit here, but those players' best days are well and truly behind them. And you have to, you can still play them, but you've got to make them less important.
Melbourne's also incredibly reliant on Stephen May, don't you think? Too?
They are, but I thought that the story for Melbourne out of that game for me was that the way they tinkered with their forward line as well. Like, you know, Van Rooyen comes in and immediately has
They dropped McDonald, did they?
McDonald. Petty was playing forward. So, you know, I thought that was...
They're experimenting?
Yeah. And then, of course, you had, you know, gone out, so Grundy was shouldering the ruck and took a few marks around the ground. Was good to see him. He's been made to be very mindful of the idea he has to. That's the game that Gawn plays is to be a target and a release, and he's got to mark more, and he is. And it was that was a good game. But
the way I've looked at Melbourne early season is the problems that they have, like the mix in their forward line, these sort of things. They're first world problems in the competition. They don't have Geelong's problems or, you know, some other club's problems. They've got problems that they've got a lot of good players and they're going to be up there unless they get injuries.
I still see Melbourne as my premiership favourite.
Agree.
I had them in a grand final with Richmond. Probably not quite so sure about the Tigers, who have started. They started the season they've started in a very mediocre fashion, albeit with injuries. But Melbourne, despite that blip against Brisbane, they look the goods to me.
Yeah, are you worried by the Tigers now?
Yes.
Some players look old.
Yeah, well, Jack in particular at the moment. And I absolutely concur with the decision to keep playing him this year because, you know, he played well in that final. And
he can convert. I think the thing is he can slot a key goal.
Yes.
What he can't do is if he plays on a gun player who's more athletic, he's not going to take many marks.
I mean, look, on the positive, you know, Noah Bolter has really showed a bit since a very disappointing round one. Obviously, Taranto's been great. I don't know what's going on with Dustin Martin, and you never really do anymore, do you? There's always so much mystery around Dusty and his ageing body, and perhaps still his mindset. I'm not sure, but you know, I feel that they just made a call, Richmond. It was almost like they went, "This is going to be pretty insurmountable for us this game. Let's just rest him." This is on the most positive you can take it.
We get to that game later, but. Let's be honest, and I'm not beanieing here at all. Collingwood were 8 goals better than Richmond.
Oh, it was a
slaughter. Mile better. It looked like a premiership contender top 4 team against a fringe 8 side.
I don't know how they didn't. Yeah, it was an absolute slaughter.
It was 3-13 at half time. Yeah. You know, the misses, and they weren't difficult misses. I think a couple of McStay hit the post. DeGoey should have had a couple in the first quarter. You know, they were sort of surging and missed.
Now that we are talking about it, we may as well. The CEO's gone on record and said, you know, the scope for improvement in footy. At the moment we're a 6 out of 10. I think did he say off field 4 out of 10? Which I don't know whether it was a whack at other people, but you sort of feel that the entire club has just completely transformed, and this is a new era.
Well, just want to go back to you and Stuart Dew on this. This is not just to throw a different idea at this. You've been talking a lot, and I have too, about the Gold Coast could have got Chris Scott, Clarkson, whoever, right? Brad Scott, whoever, brand name people. The Collingwood example is the counter of someone who Gleeson, you batted for him.
But they're Collingwood, Jake.
No, I know, but sometimes you just that new coach. If Craig McRae doesn't happen, is this happening? In my opinion, no. I think this
No,
is...
no,
I
but
and with Leppich and Bolton...
Justin Leppich
and Justin
in particular,
Leppich,
who
so-
seems to be running the show tactically, and I think has really missed at Richmond. I think that he's been a big part of it. McRae is just clearly the spiritual leader, the cultural leader, and he's been unbelievable. But that and Eddie Maguire has admitted that had he still been running the club, he would have gone for Hardwick or Clarkson.
No, I think he would have ended up with Ross Lyon.
I think he was keen on Damien Hardwick.
But do you think Hardwick would have gone to Collingwood?
I'm just saying what Eddie said.
Yeah, no, but
what Eddie thinks.
Yeah, but Damien Hardwick isn't going to walk out on
Ross Lyon was another one, but those three were on the hit list. So he thinks big club, big coach.
Yeah, so I don't agree with that.
And McRae is he's extraordinary, and he's becoming a bigger figure, isn't he?
Well, but it's a different style of coaching. It doesn't come across as command and control. There's a lot of command and control successful coaches. Clarkson's a classic command and control coach. McRae comes across Ted Lasso, as you put it, Gleeson.
Well, he just talks about love and happiness all the time, and the players happy.
Bit zen.
He's going to have to be more than that. He's going to have to be a bit inventive this week, though.
Yeah,
because they've got no ruck, zero ruckman.
Dan McStay.
Well, he's
against his old side.
He's 194, and he's against his old team. And he's a
McInerney.
Yeah,
the way their midfield's playing, and the way they're just moving the ball, you feel like you just need someone who can at least make a contest.
Well, they could put Pendlebury in the ruck. I'm trying to,
Well, is there any chance a couple of Brisbane's big players can actually lift?
One in the goal square in particular.
Oh, yep. It's frustrating to watch Joe Danaher. It's really
it's
frustrating.
Always been frustrating to watch. His whole career's been a frustration.
It's particularly frustrating at the moment.
Yeah. If you're Chris Fagan, what do you do with Joe Danaher?
Would
you have dropped him to make a statement, or is that too big a statement? Because he did all right the week before.
Well, you want to make statements when it actually matters, rather than so you go in against a good team. You look at Collingwood and go, well, it would be a statement now to drop.
I think Collingwood would welcome that.
It's a game we should win. Exactly. You don't give the opposition what they want.
You can't drop him
this week.
And it reminds me a bit of the way Ken Hinckley has just persisted, and he's been good and bad at times. But Charlie Dixon, he will not back away from. It was his call. They were determined to get him. They are going to make it work, come what may. And that's the way. Whenever you talk to people at Brisbane about Danaher, just no one, even in their most frustrated moments, will say a word against him. I tell you what.
Bringing up that game, coming off the back of Gold Coast, I think Gold Coast winning, they were very relieved to win that game, not only for their own season and the coach and everything, but Isaac Rankin. They didn't want to lose him, and they saw everything that they lost in that game. He was outstanding.
Should have won the medal.
Yeah, should have.
I know there's a controversy about the medal, but he should have won that.
Why didn't? So there was Simeon Thomas Wilson. There were two other radio broadcasters who voted, who were in...
David King.
Yeah, David King was watching it on TV, and I know it's a different TV than the one we see, the Fox Footy setup. There was an ABC guy and a 5AA guy. I should remember who they are, but none of them gave votes, I think, to Rankin.
Can't they find,
Seems weird.
Warren Treadray or can't they get, I mean, Rashudo could do it. I mean, you know what I mean? It's sort of, he's on the boundary. I mean, you could...
It just...
By the way, it doesn't excuse Fox Footy from not covering a Showdown live on a Saturday night, big round 3. That's pathetic. It's just not good enough, and I know they're not the only ones, but that is really disappointing.
And just another one on the Showdown. It would be nice if the AFL fixtured a Showdown on Friday night.
Yeah,
I've been fighting for that for a while. I don't think it's going to happen, but anyway, it was extraordinary that Rankin didn't get votes from anyone else.
Yeah, some of the time the game just makes you want to throw your hands in the air, but you can't because you might be penalised.
Stephen Cornelio, well, the words were something along the lines of, "Why wasn't that a free kick?"
Yeah,
and
how was that not a free kick?
How was that not a free kick? I think we got to get the quotes right. And he got a pivotal goal against the Giants to Carlton.
He was told the words weren't... I'm fairly certain he was told on the ground by the umpire the words weren't the dissenting problem. It was the hands out.
Hands out.
I think
that's the way
right.
he explained it to Whitfield, was it? I was watching that game. I would go as far as to say it cost GWS the game. They had real momentum at the time. And I'm all for stamping down on dissent, and it wasn't abuse, it was dissent. But I've seen at least 4 of those incidents live at the footy in the last 2 rounds.
In the next day.
Hang on, just to give an example, to underscore what you're saying, Caro, I think it was a poor decision by the umpire, but I don't want to... I understand why it's an important... this was the wrong decision at the wrong time. The overall thing of dissent is the correct policy. When players kick the ball... When the ball gets kicked towards the boundary line, the players appeal by putting their arms out. This is happening all the time, frequently. There's no dissent. They don't say, I'm paying a
There's a
free
difference
kick
between
against you
appealing for a free as opposed to complaining there wasn't a free.
Can you imagine, though, if that had been Essendon or Richmond or St Kilda on their big milestone game? And I mean, people would... It's because it's GWS, it's still a big issue, but no one really...
There's a few people that don't like the Blues that are kind of teeing off a bit too.
I did tip GWS, and I think I'm the only one who did, so I was a bit ropeable. But you got to feel sorry for Carlton supporters. Is there any chance they can just enjoy a game or enjoy a win?
They're unbeaten.
I know they are unbeaten.
Yes,
but God, it must be frustrating to watch them. I mean, they actually were the better side, I felt, on Saturday. But
their better team, Patrick Cripps, was mighty, and they're going very nicely. I reckon, Carlton. They've got a lot of.
They make heavy weather of winning, though, Jake.
Yeah, but glass half full or glass half empty.
Oh,
I'll take the.
I know too many Carlton supporters who would just have really struggled.
Oh no, they're just all nervous Nellies because of the last 10 years.
Surely there's, just on that decision though, I can't get past it, that there's a difference between putting your arms out plaintively or haplessly as opposed to demonstratively and aggressively. Dissent it was initially abuse, and then it became dissent. You're dissenting from my decision. Well, querying a decision isn't necessarily dissenting. It's just asking.
By the time a lot of people hear this will already have been done by the AFL. Whatever.
Let's predict.
Okay, let's do the time capsule. I'll do the. Do you think there'll be an Iraqi information minister type? Where this was a fair decision?
It almost happened at the time. I mean, they went back to the Fox Footy commentators, and Jonathan Brown goes, no, it was the right call by the umpire, and another of the commentators said, no. I mean, the actual on-the-ground commentators were going nuts and they couldn't believe it. But back in the Fox studios, who were covering the game, they were pretty comfortable with it. This is because
all rules are structured that umpires will never completely be wrong, because the rule allows for, your arms are out, so therefore it was that. So the umpire will be cleared. But the fact that we see multiple instances in the very next game or the 2 games after that of the same sorts of incidents that are not penalised.
I
hope you're right. I hope you put your hand up, AFL. But the other, was it Brown or the other in-studio panellists said, no, the truth is that Stephen Coniglio cost his side the goal and potentially the game.
Yeah, I want to give credit to Adam Kingsley for how he handled it on the day. Really good. Didn't bite. Haven't seen it. Don't know what was said. We don't want to give him away. Well said, Adam Kingsley. Don't give the players an excuse.
Don't believe a word of it, though.
Well, then the club was saying things later, like, it's an outrage,
Yeah.
So you can just, knowing some of the people there, you'd know how that would...
Grassy knoll.
How that would play out. But I think the broader thing on this is that our game is one where is there many games in the world where there's more interpretative areas of laws. So you're holding the ball. We've been debating that for 100 years, and we'll keep debating it. Prior opportunity. What is prior opportunity? There's interpretive things, and dissent is interpretive. So it's very, very difficult to get this right.
Well, there's a bunch of them at the moment. The push in the back.
Bumps?
It was, if you had your hands in the back, it was an automatic free. Now just push in the back doesn't exist. You can shove them with your bum or your shoulder, or you can just push them and say, you worked him under the ball. Worked him under the ball? That's just a push. And the same as a tackle. If you tackle someone with the ball and it gets knocked out in the tackle and you bring them down believing they still have it, it's holding the man.
Well, I would say to the AFL on this particular decision, Stephen Coniglio, to use their language, could not have reasonably expected to have a free kick paid against him.
No.
On the context of what has happened previously. Could he have reasonably expected that he would get a dissent free? To me, no.
No. Now, for pure theatre and drama, you wrote a very good piece about Alistair Clarkson returning to his old team, catching another flight. Is he home yet? Did he catch it?
I think he got out very quickly, from what I could see.
Well, you You can see why.
I'm told he was on the ground after, because he was coaching from the ground again, and then he walked. Someone saw him walk to the centre of the ground. Whether he spoke to Luke Bruce or one of his old players, I'm not sure, but went nowhere near Sam Mitchell and left the ground very, very quickly. And I think some expedient Hawthorn supporter immediately ran a sheet over one of the fences saying Mitchell 1, Clarkson 0.
Ooh.
It was a grudge match, and how Sam Mitchell was contained, but how happy was he?
Yeah,
he would have been
There was a
jubilant.
lot, and
Did he outcoach his old coach?
well, he seemed to play his old coach's game back to him. Like the possession game felt very
Lots
old
of marks,
Hawthorn.
Kept
Lots
the
of
ball out of
skill-based.
North were playing a very good pressure game, and
Use the width of the
Use the
ground.
width of the ground. It's a huge ground. Something that people forget, because the TV, if you haven't been there, the ground is enormous, and it's got all this space. And Hawthorn used it, a bit of home ground advantage. And the other thing is, to be fair to Clarko, absolutely, this is really important. No Jai Simpkin, and when LDU pulled out, if any of us had known LDU,
I would have tipped
I would
Hawthorn.
have tipped him, yeah.
I mean, he's
sure.
been
He's a star.
He's been a barometer this year for
He's
them,
their best
hasn't he?
player right now.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. The moment of the round, for better or worse, though, was Jamari Ugle-Hagan invoking or reprising Nicky's iconic moment and image with from the Wayne Ladby photo of pulling his jumper up.
It was a wonderful moment, but I've got to say another wonderful moment, and we'll go back to that, is Nicky Winmar himself with Plugger and Anita Frawley at the MCG on Saturday night. St Kilda's biggest ever home and away crowd.
No,
Or-
it's their biggest at the MCG.
Biggest-
as a home game. They've got over 80,000 against Collingwood.
Yeah, but as
a home game,
yes,
yeah, they've had a bigger one at Waverley.
Okay, well, biggest at the MCG.
Biggest at the MCG. Yep.
Those scenes were just they were wonderful, and that was, Ross has just been extraordinary for them. But getting back to Ugle-Hagan, not only that, but he bounced back, didn't he?
Oh, no, not just bounced back. He went further than he's ever been.
Yeah.
This was the game of his life to date, game of his career.
Yeah.
This was, and maybe it
Hopefully,
is,
it's the start of something.
yeah.
and
Hopefully,
not the
it is
highlight.
and you hate to think that what prompted it, but he came out like Bontempelli, determined, emotionally charged. We're not going to lose this game, and they were phenomenal.
They just scrapped it out.
They scrapped.
No, they just.
But there was more than scrapping about Ugle-Hagan. He's got
He's got skill, he's got class. He's got real ability, and that's why he was the number one pick. And he's carried the burden of being pick one, as well as all the stuff that's going on. Don't forget, being pick one is a hell of a burden on any player, and some players are not equal to that.
He's felt like a young guy.
I think he
enjoying
reveled in it early, but maybe he reveled in
I
it
think he
too
probably
much.
he was a bit
And
immature in
his
enjoying
little mate
the spoils.
Arthur.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was a great TV event. I watched that one on TV, and I thought it was Bontempelli from the moment the game started. As you said, he's played better games, but he's
he
never led
wasn't
like
a
that.
lose. And look, and I wrote about this, but just do you guys reflect on the difference between the Winmar, the 30 years, and obviously things have changed a hell of a lot. Interesting that the St Kilda players went down several weeks ago to Moorabbin for Winmar. There were 17 of the players from that. That's a hell of a gathering to get that many of.
Nicky Elvis was very loved down there, though.
Yeah, well, no, but I think what's happened, talking to Andrew Plimpton and other people, what's happened is what people now understand of the Winmar moment, more than when it happened, they now understand how big it was. Because Plimpton said the enormity of what it was not recognised at the time within the club.
Do you think the AFL recognised it a bit better this time round as well? They immediately, after Ugle-Hagan's moment, they put out a release the next morning, reaching out to Nicky, getting quotes from him. At least
Give me a spell.
And-
What
Give me
else
a
were they
spell.
going to do? I mean, I could not forgive the AFL for when it was difficult. That's not difficult. I mean, what happened was an utter disgrace with Ugle-Hagan. I mean, it's hard for the three of us, I think,
we don't live in that world.
to think that there would be someone who would say to him what they said. You just can't understand how that still happens.
And in his inbox.
It's just so disgusting, and
No, it's demoralising.
in every it
degrades all of us.
Exactly, it's devastating. So of course, how easy? I mean, of
But
course the
what
AFL
are they
are going
to do find the person? If they can't find them, what are they to do?
No. The AFL have done and said all the right things, but that was a Dorothy Dixer for them. I mean,
Yeah,
the
it
biggest
was,
free
but at
hit
least-
ever. Of course, they're going to react like that, like any decent person would.
But there were Dorothy Dixers back with goods, and they didn't respond to it in the appropriate manner. This, at least, they realised.
What does Gillen say? I was a week late. I mean, please,
Only
week
a
late. They were weeks late, months late. I mean, that abuse of goods, or the booing, was big in May. And
Started in 2013.
yes, in the grand final.
And
certainly in the grand final, it was
in
audible.
2012, that was. By 2014, it was well entrenched. By
Yeah.
2014, it was well and truly happening.
Yeah. And
Right
there
through
were
the
so many missteps. And yes, we know he was a new CEO and the commission was out of control and couldn't agree. And this isn't Gillan McLachlan I'm pointing the finger at, by the way. I mean, he sort of probably had the right idea, but was not in any way strong enough and just paralysed by his own media team and his commission. But he overconsulted. But to say that, wasn't it wonderful, the way they responded with Ugle-Hagan? Please.
Was it? And this doesn't.
It's a stain on the AFL administration that they will wear forever.
What? The goods thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Or you're talking about the whole Indigenous thing?
No, just that Goods has gone from the game and seemingly never to return.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
no,
they could have, and I believe they could have changed that.
They probably had to do it a lot earlier, didn't they?
They could have acted. They didn't see it. They didn't see it because they were blinded by, I don't know what, scared of their supporters or something.
Without wishing to diminish the Ugle-Hagan moment or be insensitive to it at all, did it also feed the right moment not feed the right moment, but it occurred and fostered that idea of a club under siege. You had Bevo under siege as well. They've come out and been belted by 50 points.
All
each
the under
game.
siegers stepped up, didn't
Yeah,
they?
they did. And it
It's
made
great.
an easier
Just
narrative.
after
It's
It
great
was a
about
bit-
footy that's all professional and we do it every week. We have a process and that's old-fashioned. We're under the pump and we get up against
But
the
what
odds
did
and all the
Bontempelli
critics.
say a week ago? We've got to strip it back. We've got to go back to basics. We've got to, and they did. That's exactly what they did, and it worked.
Yeah, and they dropped Sam Darcy, and they looked to have more balance in their team.
Whether
Not
it will
that
continue,
that's on Darcy, but,
whether it will continue to work is the big question.
Yeah, how long
They've
do
got
you
a lot
get
of
breathing
talent.
space?
That list's got a lot of talent. I just stick to that. I stick to
That's
that.
why the coach was under the pump.
I stick to that position, and let's keep it going, Bulldogs, because you are good enough to be a top six side.
They
for
should
sure.
beat Richmond, I reckon.
On paper, but the games aren't played on paper.
So true, Jake. What a wise man he is.
Right now, Jake, we've got St Kilda,
Over the top.
undefeated, top of the ladder. It's all about Ross.
Yeah, well, look, with the teams they're putting out there, he's done incredibly well because they went out with Jack Steele.
Yeah.
Look at the Essendon midfield versus St Kilda midfield. You would have thought Essendon might have done better. Neither team really had target forwards. Ross has got them playing. Still, they're stingy. They're like 50-something points a game or something average against 60 or something. A little low.
167 so far for the year.
167 for the year. So that's Ross, but they are scoring very
Scoring
well,
better.
and they're doing it with a team. They've been underdogs in the first two games. They certainly were against
Yeah.
Fremantle, and
Yeah, complete underdogs. And
not against Essendon. They weren't.
No,
No,
not coming into that game. But they shouldn't have been more than just over even money favourites, really, because Essendon had played pretty well too.
Don't you think that the 150th thing?
Oh, they
don't
always
tell me that doesn't have an effect.
So when they're celebrating St Kilda, when they play those celebratory games, there was one against Collingwood a few years ago. They tend to play well.
Yep.
They tend to play
But
well.
hasn't he, and we have to remember, they were 8-3. There was the nucleus of a good team there that has been able to mix it with the
look at
best.
who they've
And a lot of
got
those
out.
were out. But to get Mason Wood, for me, he was just the journeyman footballer. Yes, he was improving, but multiple clubs, couldn't find a position, been used everywhere. Their best player across the first three rounds. Now he's injured too, which is sort of emblematic of their season. Wilkie, outstanding the other night.
Wilkie's been a good player, though.
He has been a good player, yeah. But Wood, to me, was the revelation. I didn't think he could reach this level of performance, and we're not sure how long now he'll be out for. But do they feel like they've got a firmer base to build this team on?
What they've got is they've got a base of belief. I don't know that they've got their base of talent is there's always players that surprise you, like Mason Wood. Mason Wood always looked like he was good. He could be really
he'd have
good, and then
moments,
he's
and
delisted,
then
and you're
just-
like, this guy should be better.
Yeah.
Classic of those players. There's players like that, and he's credit to It was starting last year. I think, to be fair to St Kilda and Brett Ratton, it was starting last year that he was coming through, and it's gone to another level. But now he's injured, so they keep finding a way. So Saints have been one of the stories of the year. So
they've got
really.
Gold Coast on Saturday night,
Down here.
Easter Saturday at Marvel. Clearly going into the game favourite. They could be 4-zip.
And play Collingwood in gather round.
Huge.
So that's the last game. The AFL have scheduled it as the sort of runt of the litter of the games at Adelaide Oval. It's the 4:40 slot, I think.
And it will be an interesting. We'll have a better handle on this by next Monday of how Collingwood copes without a ruckman. So, St Kilda's blessed there with Marshall's a very good player. Will that be sufficient to sway it? Collingwood's playing a very good style of footy, but I expect, I don't know about you, Jake, but they've got no, obviously no Cox or Cameron. Aidan Begg that played last year, he's injured as well. Steen, this kid, has played 2 games of footy. This is Collingwood with their rucks.
Brisbane game.
Yeah, with their Brisbane game. So what do? I'd suspect it'll be McStay and Ash Johnson as the second ruck, you'd think. How that goes beyond that, I mean, would you expect they structure that way?
You almost wonder whether Oscar McInerney could just grab the ball out of the air and just kick it forward. You could almost do that and just get clearances that way. It's whether the Collingwood midfielders. It's one of these things. It'd be like the old Clarkson when they used to play against Hawthorn used to play against Nat Nui. They used to have a rule: the ball has to hit the ground. So the ball has to get on the ground when you're playing it with a ruck disadvantage. You know you're going to lose the ruck.
Well, Craig McRae is in ex-Richmond as well, and that was the Sean Grigg second ruck. Don't play a ruckman, just play a competitor and a runner. So
I'm not worried at all about Collingwood without I know people are saying it's going to be a disaster. I mean, they'll get them back at the right time of year. I think I think they'll go into the game against Brisbane as favourites, even though it's at the Gabba. And
really?
It'll be a big upset if Brisbane can beat them because they just look unbeatable.
They beat Melbourne. They beat Melbourne convincingly until the last thing.
It will be.
They're a different team up there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it will be for me.
That's what the record shows.
Yeah, that's true. But Collingwood look unbeatable at the moment. They just look extraordinary.
They look really good, but
they look beatable without a ruckman.
We'll see.
One for you, Caro. Have the AFL landed on the right fixture for Good Friday by putting the Blues up against the Kangaroos?
No, Michael. The right fixture Good Friday is no football on Good Friday. It was just a magical thing about footy that was a bit different, and that's the way it should have stayed. I think they've cheapened the product, in my view. I mean, it'll be an interesting game, and obviously I'll keep an eye on it because I have to.
Still be highly watched, and that'll justify it.
No. I don't think we should have football on Good Friday. I just thought it was a unique thing for our game, and so many unique things are going, and that would have been one they should have stuck with.
Jake?
Well, the part of me that's a journo says...
That's all of you.
That's a fair big chunk of me and us. I like having a game that I can watch, given that it's also a day where a lot of things are shut. So I don't mind having footy on Good Friday. We also live in a secular society.
It's not a religious thing for me. It's
just a day of a solemn day, just a day off.
Yeah, just and
how can be anything but religious?
You can't just have a day where you don't go to the footy or the movies. I mean, there's plenty to do on Good Friday without having a football game. I think it would have been a nice thing for football to stick to it, but that's gone. Yeah, clearly I'm in the minority.
No, I just don't see how it's anything other than religious. I mean, it's Good Friday.
I'm willing to be persuaded about it, but I've not got strong views.
Listener question from Nick. Tanking doesn't happen on game day. It happens with list management in the off-season. When will the AFL consider a draft lottery to incentivise clubs to keep a competitive list? I don't think they will.
No, they won't, and they shouldn't. Tanking has happened on game day.
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
No.
We remember it very well, and we all sat at Dean Bailey's farewell press conferences, the late press conference, the late lovely Dean Bailey, where he admitted I played players out of position.
Well,
I played players out of position.
I covered you might have too, Gleeson, the notorious, late in the season Melbourne. Jordan McMahon game, the Richmond game, where Richmond people after the game said, "How are we going? We were doing everything to win, and they weren't, and we still had to win after the siren.
Yep.
How are we going?" And when some of the positional moves backfired on Melbourne, where players were placed in positions that were inappropriate, and they started to play better.
I think there was a game where North had to beat late in the year, and North was playing Collingwood, and it was the year they ended up getting Lockie Hansen in the draft that year, and I think they had Brad Moran on Nathan Buckley, and he was beating him.
And there was
North
a game
was up
over
at
in
three-quarter
Perth,
time.
which
They
has
lost,
become known as the Hazelby game.
Yep.
They lost. Well, they lost, and they ended up getting Paul
When
Hazelby.
Andrew Demetrio was talking about it at the time, he sounded like J. Edgar Hoover saying there was no such thing as the mafia.
Yeah.
When he was talking about tanking, like it didn't happen.
Yeah. Incidentally, Brad Moran did fall on his feet after that, sold a business after he retired for $210 million.
So, but the answer to our question, Nick, is that no, look, it's not fair. You can't do that.
Another listener question, this one from Andrew. When will the AFL mandate that the broadcasters have to be live at the stadium where the fixture is played? Having a boundary rider there while the call team isn't only highlights the deficiencies with no cohesion when they throw to a cross.
Look, I think that the AFL will never mandate it, but they will be very upset about that, and that phone calls would have been made. That's my view. Pressure, but not mandate. What do you think, Jake?
There might be minimum requirements. I don't think it's going to be. I think COVID changed a lot of things about what people can and can't do, and there was a money imperative. Also, the broadcasters, particularly in the case of Foxtel, have paid so much money that relationship is, the broadcaster has the whip hand in that relationship to a degree, but there's probably
been terrible for the industry.
Probably,
hasn't it?
well, yeah, and
for the media industry, because suddenly bosses have gone, we don't have to send teams to games, and it's just not the same.
I think they can mandate a minimum requirement. To say everyone has to go. You got to say, well, you got to have someone in a special comments or a caller at the ground. Now you have Adam Papalia.
Well, they had Ricciuto there, I assume.
You have Ricciuto. You want more than just a boundary rider.
Incidentally, Scott Camporeale and Josh Franco were two of the other commentators who didn't give votes to Rankin on the weekend. But to not send a team to the Showdown, it's just it's appalling.
Yeah. Final one. Has Freo turned the corner? Big win in the Derby.
No. No. I want to see a bit more than that in my sample size.
Against a bottom 4 team.
West Coast, with the injuries they had, were not far off winning that game. And West Coast were commendably committed, and they were unlucky with injuries, or you could argue they've got older players, but no, they haven't turned the corner yet.
So Adam Simpson said he was only talking to his coaches on the boundary because there was no players to talk to. They didn't have a player. They did not have a player on the boundary.
And by the way, a comparison between the Showdowns and the Derbies, the Showdowns are outstanding. Like, the games generally are great. Storied moments galore. The Derbies have been very disappointing over the last decade, I think.
Oh, and also, while we're on that, credit also to Ken Hinkley and Matty Nix in the week leading up, saying, "Oh no, we hate them. We when they play, we barrack against them. We want them to lose." Yep. I mean, I like that. Just
it would have been
open
nice
hostility. Let's not sugarcoat it.
There'd be an opportunity here to have Josh Carr and Ricciuto on the boundary too, I reckon.
Oh, it'd be fantastic.
A little Ramsgate on the boundary. I reckon that would have been a lovely touch, given Josh Carr's now back at the club, and people saying he could even be the next coach. So surely there's a little Ramsgate on the boundary.
I've still got Port Adelaide friends who count the Richmond victory over Adelaide back in 2017 as it was like Port Adelaide had won the premiership. Seriously, that's how.
On that note, that is all we have time for today. Thanks to you, Caro, and to you, Jake, for joining us. Thanks also to Channel 7 and Fox Footy for the audio we've used in this episode. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on Thursday for the round 4 edition of our Expert Tips podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you then.